for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM. Welcome to another episode of Agile.FM, and today I'm here with Niels Pflaeging. Niels can be reached at Twitter at Niels Pflaeging. He's an author, speaker, consultant, but most importantly an author of several books. One of them is Organized from Complexity, that is already in the third edition, was recently released. And the book I want to talk about with him today is, in particular, that's Complexity Tools, and that is a book that will be released by the end of April 2018 in English. That was published with Silke Hermann, but today it's just Niels here speaking with me about this book. But first and foremost, welcome to the podcast, Niels.
Thanks for inviting me, Joe. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure here as well. Thanks for carving out time. Niels, you are, from a description, I'm just going to read out a few things here. You're a vegetarian, you have no driver's license, and you never owned a car, right? And that makes you very, very different in this world. And it shows the way how you think a little bit, and that's why I'm saying this. Your style or your way of how you publish your books, how you write the books, and especially your talks, that somewhat represent that kind of description. Tell me maybe a little bit of why that is the case. Why vegetarian? Why no driver's license? Why no car?
I think that being a vegetarian and not having a driver's license is not so radical, not so unusual. And this new book, Complexity Tools, is my fifth book. Yeah. And we thought of including something personal at the end of the book. So we thought about, let's tell the readers, if they like, a couple of stories about ourselves, and let's even talk about ridiculous details. And being a vegetarian, it's not. It's rather ridiculous, really. But yes, it's part of the book project of this book is we wanted to make it personal and to be blunt and very, very clear throughout the whole book. One of the ideas of this book, Complexity Tools, is not to be moralistic, never to raise the finger, never pointing at anybody, not be moralistic, but to be very, very clear.
Yes,
we try to do that on all pages. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the word I was looking for, blunt, right? So blunt is your book is written in a very specific style. It's very easy on the eye with the pictures, the elements, and so forth. You can make very easy. It's almost like you can read them on an elevator ride, at least one of those Complexity Tools, because it's just a page or two, and it gives you an idea and something to try. But the book's language is also very engaging and controversial. These are the things that really came out for me when I read this. You're very specific. You're very clear in terms of the boundaries of things. You're basically saying that the leadership has to change and so forth. Complexity cannot be managed nor reduced. It can only be tackled with human skill. So there is no other approach to that, and you defend that clearly, which I think is awesome for audiences. But why is it so important for you in particular?
Well, I think over the last couple of years, many things have changed in our field. I mean, in the agile field, or in the let's say organizational development field, or even the leadership field, I think the willingness of people to be open for the revolution, so to say, for the reinvention, or for, as I like to call it, for the organizational renaissance. There is an openness now. There is a willingness to reflect. When I started writing and speaking and consulting 15 years ago, people were really struggling with accepting that planning made no sense and that management could be dead. All those were topics I spoke about and wrote about. They were struggling with all these concepts that, command and control should be over, and what to do instead of planning, and what would be the alternative to bonuses and incentives. And today there's much more openness. I think also thanks to authors like Frédéric Laloux, for example, we now have find audiences in our field, I think, that are willing to break with the tradition. They do not know how. And this is why I continue to believe in business books and in books and in speaking, also at conference, because I believe that the time is here for people to pick up the message, also to really get a grip at Agile, for example. Right. So far, most organizations have fuddled with the tools, right?
Yes.
And that's why I like to be blunt. That's not Agile. That's just creepy pseudo Agile, so to say. We've been fooling ourselves that this is Agile, but we know, most of us know that there's more to it. That's why in this book we try to be blunt about complexity and its effects on organizations. And this is not a question of opinion or of moral. We do not try to be moralistic in this book. We try to be clear about that there is a science, that we know a lot of things about sociology of organizations, about complexity and its effect.
Yeah,
that's in the book.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you just mentioned Agile and conferences, right? So you're going a little bit on a tour, and we're gonna have some connection points in Munich on the 26th of April in 2018 at agilemunich.de. You will make an appearance there, but you're also gonna come over a few days after that to Agile NYC, where you're also gonna give a talk, and there's also other keynotes and so forth you're gonna do in North America. I think at Agile Main and so on. So there is definitely an interest in the topic for sure. What I saw is in your thinking is there is this dip when Taylorism appeared, and I forgot the exact time frame you mentioned there, but there's a long window where Taylorism was the approach of tackling complexity and so forth. But there was the time before Taylorism looked exactly or very similar to the time after Taylorism, as you describe, is now in the knowledge age. First of all, are these two things comparable, before and after Taylorism? And if so, why is it so hard to just do what we did before?
Yes, I think as a community, also in the Agile community, but in the business community, we get hypnotized by current trends, by blockchain and digitalization and whatever it is, we get hypnotized by the fads, and we easily lose sight of the historic context of what we're doing. Where does management come from? Where does management of social technology come from? Where do the notion comes from that organizations must be commanded and controlled by managers, that we have to have sales departments, or very relevant to Agile, why do we have product managers in the company and Agile developers on the other side, or development teams on the other side? All these boundaries, these silos, they were dreamt up in the industrial age. It was only 100 years or so ago that these concepts were invented. The concept of the org chart, of budgeting, all these concepts are recent. So, and there is a common theme between the pre-industrial age, we call it the crafts manufacturing age, and today's age, which is a high level of complexity in value creation. We often think that 200 years ago everything was simple and trivial. Scientifically speaking, that is wrong. It was an age of complexity, because the crafts manufacturer or the workshop company, they had to wait for the client and customize the product, something that we now do. Or it's the same kind of feeling that we have today when we set up an Agile, let's say, an Agile project. Yeah. So we are back to a high level of complexity. After 100 years or so of the industrial age, in the 1970s or 1980s, complexity grew back. And that is something that we still struggle with. Yeah. Agile is a response to that, and this kind of organization that we describe in complexities is a response to that.
Is this because there's a lack of body of knowledge from these pre-Taylorism times? Why is it so hard? Why do we fall into this behavior of Taylorism if we actually had the other complexity and an approach? You mentioned craftsmanship, right? Why is it so hard? Why do we fall into this pattern? Why is it so difficult for us to not do that anymore?
Well, one thing that we didn't have in the crafts manufacturing age is huge organizations. Most organizations were small. There were very few organizations 150 or 200 or 300 years ago that were large. So the scale of globalized markets is very different from the scale of markets 200 years ago in the crafts manufacturing age. So this is new. And about larger organizations, most of what we know, let's say 90% of what we know comes from command and control thinking, from management thinking. And maybe 10% come from the realm of Toyota, of lean, of agile. So we are competing with 100 years of industrial age command and control thinking and memes and language and patterns, so to say, and structures and images of organization. Now we have to say, no, we have to really break away from that and say, no, organizations cannot be pyramids, they must be peaches. Organizations cannot we have to eliminate the notion of project managers to become agile. We have to get rid of product managers to have so that Scrum can work, for example. So we have to really. This is not a little incremental shift. It's a renaissance thinking and of concepts. And we are, although of course we are all somehow socialized in command and control imagery, and it's tough sometimes to recognize that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Because nobody wants to be evil or bad, and we are all infested with this thinking. Which is why sometimes, as a little joke, with a certain sense of humor, I like to say that we need to exercise management from our organizations. People are not the problem, but there is an evil spirit in organizations that we must exercise.
In your book, you refer to X and Y type people based on Douglas McGregor's work. Are you disagreeing with him, or do we misunderstand him?
Most of us, I would say, misunderstand him. I'm a big fan. I like to say that, again, this is not entirely seriously, but sometimes I like to say that I'm his only fan. And this is a joke, of course, because we all talk about theory X and theory Y, but there is a persistent misunderstanding with McGregor, persistent error in perception of his concept. That concept is old, of course, 55, 60 years old. But McGregor was adamant at the time, in the 1960s, that theory X people to be motivated, people who meet the carrot and the stick, that they did not exist. That the problem is not people, but the organizations we have built. McGregor was very, very clear about that. And I recommend to everyone really to pick up his original book and read the book. Most people do not believe me that it's all there. McGregor understood a lot about Agile. I mean, he was maybe one of the main precursors of Agile in a way. Like Edward Deming, of course, as well, or Taiichi Ono, or these Toyota people. So the origins can be found there. And I think if we want to understand Agile as well, if we want to understand modern organizational development, we must take the issue of agreeing on human nature assumptions in an organization very, very seriously. And that is a topic of the book as well.
Yeah. So basically, you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're saying there are only Y-type people.
Yes, people are not donkeys, they are not children, they are not stones. They are already motivated. People cannot be motivated. That's impossible. So we must, if we want to harvest people's motivation, and this, I'm not saying this in a negative, I'm not meaning this in a negative sense. If we want to harvest people's motivation that they bring to the table, that they bring into organizations, we must strive not to demotivate them. We must build systems that are fit for actual human beings. Command and control is not fit for actual human beings. It is neither fit for complexity nor fit for human beings. And that is the failure of command and control or management, the social technology today, is that it is neither fit for complex markets as we have them today, nor for the complex work like in agile software development, and command and control or management, the social technology, is not fit for real human beings.
Yeah.
This is why waterfall has never worked.
Yeah. Are you saying you can? I mean, are you saying you cannot pay people more and more and more and get more motivation out of them?
No, you can't.
You can't.
And
right?
that is something that Frederick Herzberg from the United States, he uncovered that in the 1960s as well, when he said, no, money is just a hygiene factor. It doesn't make people, it doesn't motivate, it doesn't make people happy. It the sufficient pay makes people not unhappy. It avoids that people get frustrated by too little pay. So pay is important for not feeling demotivated, but it doesn't motivate anyone. The motivation must come from purpose, participation.
Yeah. Well, it might be short term. It might be icing on the cake, right? In a short term, but not on a long term kind of thing.
Yes. And the question is, are we in business of building short-term organizations?
Exactly, you're right.
Think lots.
Yeah. So how do you envision salary, pay, all that stuff to happen in an organization you're proposing and promoting?
Yes. Well, what we say in the book, there are some of these in the book. There are 33 complexity tools, and 2 of them are about pay systems as well. Some of the first complexity tools in the book, I think, are about pay. And there is nothing, let's say, there is nothing revolutionary there. If we take the science of human nature or human motivation seriously, and we have a lot of evidence that incentives and bonuses and bribes do not work, that they are an impediment to functioning teamwork, at least. So I think the conclusion must be that, okay, we have to pay people fair in a fair way. We have to pay them enough. We have to pay them properly and fairly, and then do everything to take people's minds off the money. That is something. The way I just said it, that is not a phrase that I coined myself. That's by Alfie Kohn, an educational scientist, so to say, a teacher and an education scientist. And he wrote this famous book, Punished by Rewards. So people like him, they already summed it up neatly decades ago in their books and their work. So, and I think that is completely true. I mean, based on what we know about motivation and human nature, we should never use carrot and stick. Just pay people fairly, and then never bribe them. That should be our mantra.
Right.
Never bribe them, because then we focus on doing evil stuff. Alfie Kohn beautifully sums it up, saying, if you pay, or if you want to kill innovation, for example, pay for it. Never do that.
Yeah. What about transparency in all that process? What is fairness? I mean, how would you define fairness, and how would transparency come into the mix around pay and structures and salary? Sometimes there are even salary ranges of people in a certain job description. I'm just picturing very large organizations here. What's fairness?
Yes. Let's take this apart. Transparency, first of all, it is not a complexity tool for us. We say in the book, we explain that if you want to solve any kind of problem, complicated problems, you can solve that with complicated tools like Excel or a checklist or software. You can solve complicated problems. You can make them simple and doable and workable with machines and algorithms and rules. If you're in the face of complex problems that surprise you, that are new eventually, you need complexity tools. You need organizational method that is fit for the job of solving complex problems. So one of the problems in the age of complexity is we encounter surprise all the time in our markets, in our work. People, everyone in organizations encounters surprise today in the work. Until the 1970s, that was somewhat different. You see that in the movies about office work in the 1950s and 60s, like Mad Men or so. You see that it was very routine based, what people did. So not much surprise. Now, in Agile, for example, or in Scrum, we appreciate that everybody is faced with, we are all faced, and teams are faced with complexity all the time. So we have to react and respond to that. And that makes transparency not just a tool, it is a principle.
Right.
Yeah. Like it or not, we must create transparency, because if we do not create high level of open data, open systems, visibility of data and information, then how can we expect people to respond intelligently or like entrepreneurs? It's impossible.
So you say
transparency is it's like turning the light on so that people can see the problems. It's like oxygen. It's not debatable. Of course, there our emotions come into play, and we say, we cannot make salaries transparent. The heads would explode, and oh my God, we would have chaos. And that's just, I'm not sure how to say this so that we don't get censored here, but that's just BS. Do you say BS? Can I say BS?
Yeah.
It's wrong to assume that people cannot handle complex transparency.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So salary is transparent. People know what people are making, or maybe even standard fare, right? Everybody the same.
Oh, that is entirely different. I do not recommend that at all because, I've written about that more in other books of mine and previous books. But the problem with equal pay for everyone, everybody earning the same. The problem with that is that ultimately salaries are not. You cannot set them internally. Salaries in organizations are externally referenced in the market. Ultimately, every organization, let's say Toyota or Google, the salaries there are in a large part mandated by the market. And you cannot just say, damn the market, let's ignore that everybody earns the same. That is, you would soon price yourself out of the market for some people and not attracting the right people. I don't think that equality is not the solution to complexity. It is fairness. And fairness is, means
I want to definitely
every person different.
Yeah, I want to definitely put one out there just to get a reaction from you. But what about an organization that subdivides or divides the budget, the profit, and somehow allocates revenue as a self-organized company or group? How about that? Like this?
Yes, exactly. The first principle or the first complexity about pay that we have in the book is about let's say base salaries or base pay, and the second is about variable pay. And in variable pay, we should never. I mean, if we're dealing with theory-wide people, which we do, you should never use bribes or bonuses or carrots and sticks. We should, if that's of interest, then we should have something like profit sharing or give people a share in the company. Those are the models that are fit for a complex work and fit for human beings as they are.
Well, we don't want to give all the
we
don't want to give all the complexity tools away here because that's what the book is, and there's several pages where people can read up on it. But I just wanted to take a deeper dive maybe in that and get a little bit of a sense of what you think about it. Maybe let's touch on one more. Maybe how do you feel about recruiting complexity tools? Recruiting in a world you're envisioning leadership would look like. Recruiting would be probably impacted as well. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that is because when we talk about pay, I think many of the concepts in the book will be counterintuitive, or these concepts may be counterintuitive, but what we say about recruiting is maybe more counterintuitive even for most of those who listen to this podcast. First of all, this book, Complexity Tools, it's a very blue and red book. Everything is blue or red in this book because we make a distinction here that it's like a theme throughout the whole book that is in organizations and work we encounter two types. We encounter problems that fall into the domain of the blue or into the domain of the red. Sometimes problems have shares of both, but the blue is the complicated and the red is the complex. That is the big theme in the book. We have to learn, if we want to build more effective organizations, also if we want to create really agile organizations, truly agile organizations, we have to learn to distinguish between blue problems, complicated problems, and red problems, complex problems. And we have to treat these kinds of problems differently. In the realm of the blue, of the complicated, checklist suffices. You can automatize, you can standardize, you can control, you can steer, you can plan. You can write a policy or a standard for it. In the realm of the red, of the complex, we encounter surprise. So we must come up with ideas. We need people with ideas to solve red problems. And when we talk of a specific problem like recruiting, the first question that I would ask is, what kind of problem is that? Is that a blue problem or a red problem? Recruiting, blue or red? And at least when I ask that in my talks, in my keynotes, people will grasp it immediately that recruiting is not simple. It is not complicated. It is predominantly a complex problem.
Yes.
And there are some things that you might automatize, but it's very little. So it's because it has to do with finding people who not only fit a job description. Job descriptions are a ridiculous blue method and should be abolished and eliminated from organizations. Ultimately, we recruit for fitness with teams who are already there, with other people, and with it's not qualification and just fitting a description. So recruiting is, and the consequence of that the right method to recruit must be what we call peer recruiting. We should take away recruiting responsibilities from bosses and HR and have teams recruit future colleagues. And this is we need recruiting technologies like that. Of course, there are organizations that figured this out quite some time ago, like Google. But it's very more. Toyota also has very interesting, very inspiring recruiting practices. Ultimately, even if teamwork may not be so exciting or may not seem so exciting at Toyota, but the notion of peers recruiting peers or teams recruiting future colleagues it's crucial. In the book, we call it, this is the ultimate leadership practice that everyone, in a good organization, everyone should recruit. Everyone.
Nice.
And not HR.
Yeah.
Nothing against HR, but they are the least likely to be good recruiters because they are so far away from the actual teamwork and value creation happening in teams. So that's paramount for Agile team. Agile team members should recruit future members of the team.
Yeah, awesome. I have a question. I'm going to ask you about a recommendation, and I don't know if there is anything with a complexity tool or not, but what would be your recommendation if a company that is or used to be recently like really in the category of a startup and is beginning to grow, and maybe growing fast or has been growing for a long period of time, and it's beyond the startup, it's really going into a mid-sized, large company. Is there anything, maybe they have started naturally with some of those ideas you have because it was a startup, but what kind of recommendations do you have to these companies that grow and to somehow embrace these complexity tools?
Yes, that is something, a topic that is in the book as well, and in one of the first chapters. Because for a startup, it's very natural not to have functional division. It's natural not to have departments, not to have business units, not to have these silos. Organizations evolve into more siloed, fragmented, departmentalization kind of structures when they grow beyond 20 people, 30 people, 50 people, 100 people. That's when they start. They functionally divide during this period of growth that a successful startup eventually will experience. So command and control, this is one of the things that we explain in the book. All organizations are born as naive beta organizations, as we call it, functionally integrated, as cell-structured organizations. Every startup is like that, but it is in that it doesn't know why it is structured like that. It just, we have 5 people, we have people, we structure like we cannot structure differently. And this naivety, of course, it gets lost once you hire the first HR person, once you create a matrix structure or hire the first consultant or create an HR department. So we get from naive beta, as we call it, a single cell organization to functionally divided pyramid structure silos. And the recommendation is to not go there.
Yeah.
In the book, we describe that every growing startup or every young organization that grows faces a fundamental decision, and most organizations slip into, they fall into the trap of command and control, because when they grow, they say, let's control things, let's create hierarchy and top-down management. Let's make a budget and strategic plans and fix targets and create an incentive systems. And then you fall into the trap of the pyramid system, or alpha, as we call it. And the solution, so to say, to sum it up a little bit, is to not go into dividing into functions, but to, if you have an organization with just one team, let's say 5 to 10 people, and you grow beyond that, then you must divide into 2 cells that can be functioning like autonomous businesses. So don't create a sales department or something like that. Create, like a 2 startup organization. And if you grow beyond 2 teams, if you have 20, 30 people, you have to divide into 3 autonomously functioning teams. And every large organization that wants to be successful today must continue every growing organization must continue to divide into autonomously functioning cells. And we call this functional integration. And it's a highly important concept, like transparency, to function as an agile organization, to be a self-structured network. And once you grow beyond that, for growing organizations, it gets more and more important to distinguish between periphery and center, a concept that's very important in the book and for every organization.
Yeah, I just recently...
You must empower the periphery.
Yeah. I just recently worked with a company that actually left that stage. It just came to my mind, and it was really funny. That person said, like, we don't have an org chart, and which is kind of a positive thing, right? But then
very good,
right? And then she said, but there is an org chart in everybody's mind. So that is something that's like, why don't we just spell it out what it is? But it's like everybody's tiptoeing around what it could be, and everybody had their own impression of an org chart. So they felt the impact of it, but they didn't have a visualization of of all these command and control structures, which is kind of sad, right? But it started so well off with the no org chart thing, but everybody had an org chart in front of them mentally, and that's kind of sad.
Yes. Yes. I once was married to a woman who worked at Google in Brazil. My ex-wife, she worked at Google, and she told me one day she came back from work and said, "Oh, we just recruited another woman from. She came over from American Express, and you do not." And she told me, "You would not believe how many paradigms this woman has in her head. She has the org chart ready in her head." Like that woman, apparently she came up and saying that, okay, we need an org chart here and the travel policy. And the Googlers would tell this woman, this Noogler, this new recruit, they would tell her, you can draw up this kind of stuff, but don't expect us to follow your rules.
Nice.
Which is very wise to it. This is very much the spirit that Google at least had at that time, and not allowing for allowing stupid rules to come up. You have to educate everyone in an organization not to follow stupid rules, but to jointly be principled and disciplined within boundaries. Like the boundaries described in the Agile Manifesto, for example.
Well, speaking of geographical locations, are there any cultures in this world that are with your ideas are easier to implement than others? Do you have an easier way somewhere? First of all, it's not mine. It's from organizations like Google and Toyota and Southwest Airlines and WL or DM here in Germany. There are organizations around the world that are radically decentralized and that have this that have left the sphere of command and control thinking. So in a certain way, in the beyond budgeting movement, where I come from which I come originally, what we call now the beta codex or the beta movement, very much similarly to the lean movement, the agile movement. I think we find pioneers of this thinking everywhere in the world, literally in every country. I've been in Brazil, in Argentina, in Germany, in the US, and in Spain, and you find pioneers of that, large or small, in every country. Okay. So the famous Brazilian example, for example, is Semco, very well-known company that has been doing this for 30, 40 years. I think we usually have the tendency to say, that may work at Semco or at Toyota, but it cannot work here. Because our people are stupid. Which relates back to theory X thinking. It's like, Agile can work at Spotify, but our people are software people. They are just our developers. They are just dumb, which is just an ugly prejudice about other people. Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's the common thing to overcome. I can say, well, let's put it differently. I think 95% of all organizations in the world are command and control, and the distribution is pretty much the same everywhere.
You have a lot of
in Africa and so. in North America. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes, we have a lot of work to do. Niels, what I actually noticed in the book, there's a list of companies you're mentioning you have worked with or had deployed some of those complexity tools. You mentioned some of those,
yes.
Zappos, Aldi, just to name a few others here. Obviously, the Google, the Southwest, the Spotifys, and so on. What's really interesting about that long laundry list of companies is I went through those and I was like, these companies are, I would think, obviously I haven't read their financial reports, very successful companies for years now. So there's something to this method, and where you would take those tools, implement maybe a few of those, maybe all of those, but you see a drastic impact on culture because all of those companies, there were several others I can't recall right now, but I think the majority of them are super successful, and I think that speaks to the tools you're promoting and to the way how you level set agile teams in the right way by looking at this book. And because it's Agile.FM and we're going to have a lot of agile listeners, this is definitely a great connect for anybody who wants to implement agile in their organization, the thinking of that, the mindset of that, in combination of what you have to tell in this book. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Niels. And just want to
may I say one more?
Of course.
You mentioned Zappos. And I have been researching the Zappos case since it became, a well-known company. I think 2007, 2008, when it became famous. And when I published my second book in 2009, in 2006, or when I published my third book in 2009, I already got interested in Zappos, and we know, of course, of tools and methods that they implemented over the last couple of years. Recently, I had the opportunity I had the pleasure to do a little workshop with Tony Shea and his one of his core teams about beta and decentralization and, getting back from functional division and from command and control and steering. And what was for me particularly interesting, I mean, it's such an amazing company, having done such amazing things, and always keeping up the spirit of a very explicitly federative culture. Still, they have to work their organizational model very, very consciously. I mean, they have to, and they are a growing company. They have been integrated into Amazon. There are lots of questions, lots of surprises just to them. So I found that particularly interesting. A company that I idolized for quite a few years. That they are seriously to how more and more federative and decentralized. They are looking into, they were much, I think, fascinated by the Organized for Complexity book. So it's never over. Toyota also struggles with it.
Absolutely.
Decentralization it's not a job done. It's like Agile. It's never a job done. It's always in perpetual.
Awesome, Niels. Thank you so much.
Sorry for interrupting.
No,
it was a pleasure.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much.
It was a fun conversation. See you, and we meet each other in Munich very soon.
We're going to meet each other in Munich. We're going to see each other in New York. And for everybody who wants to connect with you, Twitter, we said that in the beginning. And we also have nielspflaeging.com. That is Niels with an IE. For everybody, it's a different spelling here. And that's just to get in touch with you and learn about your books. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.